In a not-so-distant future where overpopulation and famine have forced governments to a drastic policy, one that limits families to having only one child, 7 identical sisters must avoid being put to a long sleep by the government, so they live a hide-and-seek existence marred by infighting while being pursued by the Child Allocation Bureau. The sisters outwit the Bureau's strict family planning agenda by taking turns assuming the identity of a single person. Taught by their grandfather who raised and named them after the days of the week, each can go outside during one day of every week as their common identity, but are only free to be themselves in the prison of their own apartment. That is until one day Monday does not come home, and the remaining sisters begin investigating her disappearance. The only thing I knew about this film before watching it is that it stars Noomi Rapace, Glenn Close, and Willem Dafoe, and that was more than enough for me to be interested in this film, because I like all 3 of these actors very, very much, and I was a little bit disappointed from the get-go, because Willem Dafoe, to be honest, is really not in this movie all that much, and he appears in more or less flashbacks, which I don't really think were all that necessary. I don't really think they work all that much, and I could basically imagine this movie without those scenes being. I could imagine this movie having those scenes being taken out of it, and it wouldn't really influence anything. Glenn Close does appear more in this movie. She eventually shows up, and she is the main villain. Now, her villain is incredibly standard, quite generic even, I would say, but it's still Glenn Close, and Glenn Close is always fun to watch, and it's always a pleasure to see in movies. She plays a politician who manipulates and pulls strings, sort of like the female Palpatine of this film, so that was quite nice to see. And yes, indeed, Noomi Rapace is playing 7 different characters in this film, and she does a pretty fine job at it. Unlike that film Split, which many people enjoyed, and I myself have also enjoyed very much, in which allegedly James McAvoy is playing 23 different personalities, but in reality is only really playing like between 5 or 7, if I remember correctly. Noomi Rapace in this film is truly playing 7 different, very distinguishable and very, very, very unique characters. On the other hand, however, I really have to point out that I truly think that they kind of played it too safe a little bit, because while yes, all 7 of the characters are very easily distinguishable, none of them are really fleshed out all that much. None of them are really more than 2-dimensional characters at best, and of course obviously the different hairstyles and different clothing help a lot, but I really have to applaud them. I really have to applaud the performance, the script, and most importantly the editing, because editing is always important in films like this in which the same actor is playing several different characters interacting in the same scenes, and yeah, you really truly never lose track of who you are watching, so they did a good job there. As a science fiction film, I definitely think that this movie is taking a tiny bit from different sources, like this dystopian future where surveillance is everywhere. It definitely reminded me of Minority Report, and the action in the film definitely reminded me of such films as Total Recall, and especially The Matrix. And there's actually a scene in this film where one character has to jump from the roof of one building onto the roof of another building, completely Matrix. So there's both a positive and a negative about the film, that eventually it does turn into a pretty generic action movie, but the action, the way it's directed, I thought was more than decent. I liked the effects, both practical as well as CGI. I mean, people being shot in the face, people getting their heads smashed into toilets and sinks and stuff like that, I thought was all pretty good. And the CGI, it's always noticeable, it always looks a little bit artificial, but it didn't bother me in the slightest, because the film actually does look pretty good and does look pretty similar to the live-action Ghost in the Shell movie released earlier this year. It's not as stunning as that movie, but it's still good enough in my opinion. As far as the story goes, yeah, the film does feature several cliches usually associated with this sort of film, like betrayal, double-crossing, revenge, manipulation, and all that stuff. And as far as twists and turns are concerned, yeah, the film does feature several, and they might not be the most mind-blowing thing, or they might not be the most unsurprising twists and turns, but at the same time, I thought they were mildly surprising enough, and I thought that they definitely didn't insult my intelligence, so there you go. What I did find incredibly surprising about the film, however, was just how it managed to mess with my expectations, really, because for something that starts out as lighthearted as it does, I was actually quite shocked when it started going into a much darker and much more violent direction, and like a very funny scene could be immediately and seamlessly followed by a very dark and very tragic and very violent scene, and I think the film really does a good job at making you feel that anything goes, that anything can happen, and that these characters are not safe, that danger is ever present. I think this is the biggest compliment I can give the film, basically, because while the story beats are very much standard, for an action, mystery, sci-fi, drama, it really managed to keep me on the edge of my seat and really keep me guessing, like, hey, are these sisters, are they going to make it? Are some of them going to make it? Are any of them going to make it? Are none of them going to make it? And all of the characters, even Willem Dafoe, who I know I like him a lot and he is good and everything, even though I think his character is a little bit unnecessary here, all of the characters here are pretty memorable. not necessarily always for the right reasons, or not only for the right reasons, because the dialogue is definitely not Shakespearean. It can get pretty clunky every now and then, but hey, this film, I really do think that it's the definition of okay. It's good enough. A lot of things in it do work pretty well, and even the idea of having this dystopian future in which families can only have a single child, I definitely think it's a good idea for this sort of movie. The problem is that the film never really flourishes into something much more clever or that clever. It never really takes this idea and does anything very interesting with it. It prefers to remain much more in the action movie mystery realm. So yeah, and the performance, Noomi Rapace's performance, is very good. But on the other hand, I don't think it's as good or as impressive as they thought it would be, or as impressive as they might like it to be. But still, it works. And this film, if I ever see it again, if I ever catch it on TV or Netflix or something like that, I'll probably watch it, I'll probably remember it, and I'll probably think, oh yeah, okay, hey, I saw this, and this is pretty alright. This is a pretty okay movie. So that was my 2 cents on this film, folks. What I want to ask you guys is, what are some of your favorite dystopian films? Don't forget to leave your answers down below in the comment section, and thanks for watching my review. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can see you later with other reviews. And until I do that, folks, as always, don't forget to stay cool, stay awesome, and goodbye.